Alright guys, as you saw in my last video, have some issues with NVIDIA right now. Their choices with what they did with Hardware Unboxed. You could watch my video, but since then there's been a lot more updates on that online. Linus Tech Tips did a big piece about that on the WAN show last night. Went off, used some very strong language. Anyway, you could take a look at that. But, I mean, if you guys are considering not buying an NVIDIA card, well then we have to think about, okay, well what does AMD have to offer? And in certain games, like Cyberpunk 2077, NVIDIA has DLSS. And, I mean, let's take a look. It has some drawbacks, so one thing I want to do in this video is show both its positives and its negatives. And overall, I think that if you have a card capable of running DLSS, you'd be crazy not to use this unless you're magically getting amazing frame rates already. But let's take a look. I've been able to find an area where we can look at some of the drawbacks. So right now DLSS is off. The game is currently set to the high preset at 1440p, except I've turned off motion blur because yuck. Anyway. So this is the game with it off. Now, what I want you guys to look at is, first of all, just get an idea of what this looks like, and also the frame rate. My frame rate counter is my bottom left. I noticed in my last video where I did some gameplay capture, people didn't notice that, at least some people in the comments. So the frame rate counter is in the bottom left there. So here's the frame rate. Again, I'd be getting slightly better frames if I wasn't recording right now, but not that big of a difference. All right, so take a look at everything. Now I want you to take a look especially at this mesh, this like great thing here, okay? So look at that. So this is with no DLSS. Now, if I turn on DLSS, and I'm not going to use auto because I'm not sure which setting that's automatically picking. So quality is, you know what, let's go down to the worst, okay? So you can really see what I'm talking about, and then we'll step these resolutions back up. Okay, so ultra performance is really extremely lowering the internal resolution of the game in order to boost performance. And then again, DLSS, if you're not that familiar with it, is basically using a machine learning algorithm that they've trained in this game to predict what your native resolution would look like by actually rendering the game at a lower resolution. Let's take a look. So look at this grate. If you want to see how it fails, look at this grate right now. Okay. Should be kind of shimmery, and that's because it doesn't have a lot of detail to work with on all of these little lines, so it's having trouble kind of putting back together what that should look like. But ignoring things like that grate now, if we walk around, like even at ultra performance mode, things look pretty good. Like ultra performance, again, is the worst possible level of DLSS when it comes to what things look like. And it's not awful. And look at, I mean, considering the frame rate thing that you get. Now, personally, I wouldn't use ultra performance mode unless it was the only way I could run the game. Obviously, I would use one of the better settings. Like look at the edges on this vending machine. They look a little bit shimmery, right? So that's what we get. So now let's turn this up a bit. So now on performance mode, notice the grate still has some shimmering. It's not quite as bad throughout the whole thing. What else? You know, this grate, these guys definitely look a little bit sharper. If we walk around, let's see how it does with the edges of the vending machine. And still a little bit of breakup on it every now and then as I move the camera. But it's better than the ultra performance mode for sure. Again, right there with the grate there, it's not doing that bad of a job. Again, if you're not trying to look for things, if you're just running around playing the game, you know, you're not going to notice too much of that. Now, let's kick on, again, back up to balance mode. Balance is where I've played a lot of the game. Sometimes I either stick it on auto or balanced. And again, look at my frame rate. Remember, we were in the 40s in this hallway when I don't have DLSS on. Okay, so that grate, not too terrible, right? Looking over here, you know, these guys look pretty sharp. Things like that. Edge of the vending machine, still maybe not perfect. Honestly, I can't remember if it's absolutely perfect even with DLSS off. So let's do quality, then we'll turn it back off and kind of look for these things again. So the vending machine, yeah, I still notice a little fringing there. I'm actually wondering how much that's there even with DLSS off. We'll see in just a second. This looks pretty good now. Right? I mean, sure, you can pick out little things, but if you're actually playing the game and not just looking for things to pick out, it's not too terrible, right? Okay, let's switch DLSS back off for another performance. I mean, another check at what did this look like without any of this, right? Okay, so there's what the grading looks like at native resolution. Now remember, you guys, you're watching this video on YouTube, which is compressed. So you might not be seeing exactly what I'm seeing. Okay, here, the vending machine edge definitely seems more stable. Less little, like, shimmering to it. Although, you know, yeah, it is better at native, for sure. All right, now I want to show you guys the other, like, absolute worst case thing. Now, I've got to say that this particular thing almost never comes up in the game at all, okay? But in this mirror, okay, so when you look in a mirror, at native resolution, the mirror image looks pretty sharp, right? Okay, now let's switch back to, let's put on the DLSS here. Let's do it like balanced. Wait, why is it not? Activate the mirror. Let me activate the mirror. Look in the mirror. There we go. You can tell that is a lower resolution, right? So I think for whatever reason on this mirror reflection thing, DLSS is just like not applying itself. That looks like a much lower resolution rendering. And I've noticed that to me as the most obvious and ugly thing when using DLSS in this game. That's been it for me. But other than that, when I'm not staring in that mirror, I think the game is looking really good on this balanced DLSS setting. So one of the points I wanted to make in this video is that DLSS has some issues. It's not perfect, and I don't want to act like one of the people who's saying that DLSS literally makes your game look better than native. It does not. However, it makes your game run a whole heck of a lot better than native, and when you're in motion, when you're moving, that will look better than a slideshow of performance, right? So what I'm getting at here is I've been thinking about buying a new graphics card, and things like what happened yesterday with NVIDIA make me not particularly excited about buying an NVIDIA card. But giving up something like DLSS, I mean, that's a hard decision to make. So I'm not planning on buying a graphics card right now because, for one thing, you can't even find them in stock. But I'd really like to see if AMD can release a real competitor to this. Because as we can see, it's not perfect, but this 2.0 version is extremely impressive, especially for the amazing performance gain that you get from it. And if you want to compare that to the things like what is currently available from AMD, which isn't really an AI super sampling technology, it's just a super sampling thing, right? This like dynamic fidelity scaling where you could lower the internal resolution to, to whatever. Let's do like minimum 80%, and we want to target like a 60 frames per second or whatever. Things get a little bit blurry, right? They get a little bit blurry. It's definitely more blurry, looking at that textures and things, than DLSS was. And some people will argue, they prefer this, it's not having the visual glitches or whatever. But honestly, for me, and again, you're viewing this on YouTube where it was all a little bit compressed. This looks a little too blurry for me. I much prefer the DLSS option. So all I'm getting at here is that if AMD wants people to jump ship on NVIDIA, they really do need to provide some sort of a real competitor to DLSS. And on that note, I want to say that early versions of DLSS were awful. Things like these grates, they were just blurry messes. in the games that I've tried them on with early versions of DLSS. So unfortunately, I'm not super hopeful that AMD's first shot at a DLSS competitor is going to be amazing. But I really think that technology like this, its main drawback to me is just its limited application to games. Like not every game supports it. So if more games support DLSS, I mean, it's just an incredibly impressive technology. And I think it'll only be getting better over time as it did with the 2.0 version. So, I mean, sure, you can say what you want about the ray tracing side of things, whatever. For me, DLSS is the big thing that NVIDIA should be pushing and AMD really needs to catch up on. It's the main thing holding me back from really jumping in happily with the AMD card. Not saying I wouldn't get one, but if they had a real competitor to this soon, that would help me make my decision. I'd actually really like to support them. All right, what do you guys think about all this in the comments section?